Impact. 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 Impact.
What is happening, all of you sexy warriors out there? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about a comparison review of my two favorite upper receiver groups to date, the Geissele Super Duty Mod 1 11.5 versus 12.5. We're going to be talking about reliability, accuracy, recoil impulse, and which one you should consider for your next build. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I cannot wait to talk to you guys about this comparison review. I've been wanting to do this for quite a long time. But before we dive into the details, I have to first go through my full disclosures. So what is my relationship to Geissele Automatics? I am a huge Geissele fan. I have been for years. I have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on their products, whether it be their handguards, their triggers for all the different platforms that make triggers for. With that being said, Geissele did send out this 11.5 upper receiver group for me to review, and Brownells, the biggest sponsor of the channel, did send out this 12.5 Geissele Super Duty upper for me to review. So luckily I have both, and if you're in the market for either one, today we're going to talk about why you may want to pick up one over the other. So if you guys are interested in picking up either one of these uppers, please head over to rangedaybro.com, hit the discounts tab. You can see all of my discount codes and all my affiliate links there, and you can support the channel while saving money at the same time. Now, while you're there, make sure you subscribe to our email list. I would also greatly appreciate it if you guys followed me over on X and Rumble. Just need to diversify my portfolio a little bit and not have all my followers in one place. That way, if big tech decides to censor me, you guys are still able to put eyes on the content I'm putting out. Also, guys, we just started a Patreon, so if you want to get early access to all the content and a bunch of other perks, go ahead and check that out as well. All right, guys, so now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's talk about these two upper receiver groups and why you might want to consider one over the other. So first and foremost, let's talk about the specs. Everything on these uppers is identical aside from a few things. First one being, obviously, the barrel length of the 12.5 is an inch longer than the barrel of the 11.5. Respectively, the rail on the 11.5 is a 10.5 inch Mark 16, where the rail on the 12.5 is 11.5 inch. Again, 1 inch longer. Both of them have a carbine length gas system. However, the 12 inch is sporting a .065 gas port, where the 11 inch is sporting a .067 gas port. Now, just as a reference point, this 11.5 Daniel Defense SOCOM profile barrel was cut down by D. Wilson Manufacturing with the intention of running it only suppressed. And so this guy is sporting a gas port of .0635. So this guy was left intentionally small to only be able to run reliably with a suppressor. So I want you guys to understand gas port size has a huge effect on a DI system, as the name implies. So while a lot of people were upset that Geissele did not go with a mid-length gas system for their 12.5, they did tune the gas port size to account for that longer dwell time. But outside of those few differences, the rest of the specs are exactly the same, and we'll talk about that later in the video when we go over the setups as well. So first and foremost, we are going to talk about reliability, because for me, that is a non-negotiable. If a weapon is not reliable, it doesn't even get my consideration. So how did the 11.5 compare to the 12.5 in this category? So I've had both of these uppers for quite some time now, the 11.5 for a little bit longer, but the 12.5 has been getting primarily most of my attention over the last few months. I've put 2,500 rounds through the 11.5 upper, an additional 2,500 rounds through the 12.5 upper. So in combination, we have 5,000 rounds through these two uppers. Something to note is that during this entire review process, 99% of the rounds fired through both of these upper receiver groups have been fired suppressed using the Energetic Armament Ferox 5.56 can. Now, it's actually a 6mm can, and for full disclosure, I do work for Energetic Armament, so take that for what it's worth. I do love the Ferox 5.56. It is not a true flow-through can, as Geissele has intended for these uppers to be run with, hence why they ship them with Huxworks muzzle devices, but it does have low back pressure qualities. It has an expansion chamber in there, and without spending too much time explaining it, it is kind of a hybrid between a traditional baffle stack can and a flow-through can. Now, another caveat I want to add is that for the majority of the reviews on both of these uppers, I was running it with the wrong buffer weight. I was running it with Geissele's braided wire buffer spring, which is correct, but with the H2 buffer weight instead of the H3, which is what comes with the Super Duty lineups. If you buy the 11.5 or the 12.5 Super Duty complete rifle, SBR, pistol, whatever, it will come with the H3 buffer weight. Now, I learned this later, and Geissele did send me out one of the H3 buffer weights. So for the last approximately 1,000 rounds through this 11.5 and the 12.5 have been fired with the proper buffer weight, that being an H3. But did it affect the reliability during that 2,500 rounds on each of these uppers respectively? The answer is no. I had 0 malfunctions, magazine, ammunition, or otherwise related, 0 stovepipes, 0 double feeds, 0 clicks and no bangs. So an absolute stellar record and what I've come to expect out of Geissele products. Now moving up from the H2 to the proper buffer weight, the H3, I did notice the ejection pattern get a little bit more in the acceptable range between 2 and 3 o'clock from the 1 to 2 o'clock it was previously. Now one last caveat is that most of those rounds were also fired in FRT mode from the Delta Team Tactical Force Reset Trigger. Now for those of you who don't know what a Force Reset Trigger is, I'm going to be having a full review coming out on that trigger here shortly, but a lot of the rounds put through both of these uppers, or the majority of them, were fired in FRT mode, which makes it very easy to achieve higher round counts on these reviews because it goes through mags pretty quickly. But again, with that extremely high cyclic rate of the Force Reset Trigger, you're getting the gun very hot, you're introducing a ton of gas blowback and carbon blowing back into the system. And for these uppers to remain reliable, even with that abuse I was putting it through, is a testament to the quality of the parts, the design, and the engineering that went into these upper receiver groups. So I'm very happy to report 5,000 rounds later, 2,500 through each of these uppers, we've had 0 malfunctions, and so we can quickly move past the reliability portion. Now moving from reliability to accuracy, I was able to achieve consistently 1.5-inch groups at 100 yards with both of these upper receivers. For a cold hammer forged chrome line barrel, 1.5 inches at 100 yards or 1.5 MOA is more than acceptable for combat effective accuracy. And how did that translate practically into shooting out the distance? Well, we shot both of these upper receiver groups at 455 yards. Did the 12.5 outshine the 11.5 at that distance? And the short answer is no. I was actually able to get more confirmed hits with the 11.5 because I used the time with the 12.5 to really learn what the wind was doing. Now on an 8-inch target at 455 yards, out of a shorter, relatively shorter barrel, that bullet is going to get pushed around, and you can see it with the trace. I'm holding off to the left edge of the target, and you can see it kind of get pushed into the target there. But reading the wind is far more important than the extra inch of barrel length I'm getting with the 12.5. It's not like the 12.5, that extra inch, that extra velocity gained, which we're going to talk about next, absolutely deleted the amount of hold or changed the amount of hold substantially enough to make a purchasing decision based off of that velocity increase. So as far as accuracy goes and the performance out to distance, I would say both of these are also on an equal playing field. So when we're talking about performance out the distance, I think a lot of you are considering the 12.5 over the 11.5 for the velocity gained. Now in previous videos that I've done, I only gathered data on like 5 or 10 round groups. However, this time I gathered a 28 shot group for both the 11.5 as well as the 12.5. Did the 12.5 outshine the 11.5 in this category? Not by as much as I originally thought when I got these two uppers. The average velocity for the 11.5 Super Duty with that 28 round group using the Garmin Chrono was 2,543.9 feet per second, so 2543. The average velocity for the 12.5 inch Super Duty here was 2,620.3 feet per second. That is a difference of, on average, 76.4 FPS. Yet again, I would consider that another negligible difference in choosing one over the other. I would not say that is enough of a velocity gain to justify going with the 12.5 if that's the only thing you're basing it off of. So if both of these are on par as far as reliability, accuracy, and performance at the distance, well then what's gonna really set them apart? Certainly it must be the recoil impulse and what it's like to shoot. So let's talk about that. You are gonna have a really tough time discerning the difference between these two uppers and their recoil impulse. I would say if you really wanna split hairs, you may be able to tell a slightly slower cyclic rate on the 12.5. Given the longer dwell time, it's able to have a reduced gas port size, allowing everything to move slightly slower. However, when you're actually shooting these, are you gonna notice it? Even shooting them back to back on FRT mode with that extremely high cyclic rate, it is still very hard to tell the difference. So yet another variable that you may wanna decide which one to buy based off of is pretty much a moot point in my opinion. So we've talked about reliability, we've talked about accuracy, we've talked about long range performance, we've talked about the recoil impulse. What is there left to talk about? So for me, what it comes down to is, what do you want to accomplish with this upper? Do you want to buy one upper to do everything? Go with the 12.5. That is simply the best advice I can give you because it does have the ability to reach out to 500 or 600 yards pretty reliably. It's still lightweight and maneuverable enough to be moved indoors when you're running a suppressor on it. And it's just a great all around, and it's gonna win the spot of my all around do-it-all rifle over the 14.5 URGI because again, there's not much this thing can't do that the 14.5 can, right? You're still getting obviously a little bit more velocity out of the 14.5, but for a well-rounded gun, just have one gun to do everything. Now the vast majority of my viewers and Americans who are gun owners probably have a 16-inch AR-15 already in their collection. So at that point, I would recommend going with the 11.5. If you already have a gun that can reach out reliably to 500 or 600 yards in the same caliber, why not go with a little bit shorter of a package that is still certainly capable out to those distances, but also is gonna remain more lightweight, more maneuverable for home defense, for a truck gun. It can still do everything the 12.5 can do, but it remains lighter, more maneuverable. And when you're pushing that weight out a little bit further, when you have a light, a laser, a suppressor, everything on the end of this gun, it does make a difference when it's an inch further out. It does feel quite a bit faster when transitioning from target to target over the 12.5. But the 11.5 also restricts your rail space. So if you wanted to run a laser and a thermal clip-on, it's going to be much harder to do on the 11.5 unless you move the laser over to the side, so on and so forth. Whereas on the 12.5, you have much more room and options up here at the front of your rail. So aside from its intended use, obviously, ergonomics, how big you are is going to play a role. I'm 6'1", so I don't mind the 12.5. It doesn't feel like it's too small. Honestly, it feels like it's the perfect size for me and perfect balance and weight. You might need that extra rail space if you're planning on doing some thermal night vision clip-on stuff with this, or running a laser and a button. So it gives you a lot more options in the front. But really, and some of you may be upset about this answer, you can't go wrong with either. Earlier in the video, I mentioned the subtle differences between the 12.5 and the 11.5. Now let's talk about the similarities. They're both going to come with a cold hammer forged chrome lined barrel, pin gas block for that bomb-proof installation, 1-in-7 twist for those heavier grain weight bullets, Mark 16 rail that has a male end on the handguard here and a female end on the upper, so they kind of go in together similar to HK style. So a stupid rock solid setup as far as the handguard goes. It has Picatinny slots all the way around on every single angle. It's a relatively thin handguard, and I have a relatively large hand, but it feels great with this hand stop. You can kind of lock right into it and really gain a really firm grip on the gun. So when you're running it in FRT mode, I never once felt like I couldn't have control of this thing. It's a really great size. Also, with that slim down handguard for reaching up, pressing the button on the top of this laser aiming module, it gives you a lot of room to work with and being able to access that top button there on the laser. Also, the reliability enhanced bolt carrier group that comes with both of these is absolutely phenomenal. It has Geissele's nano weapon coating, which is like a super hard, super slick surface, so very easy to clean. They also developed a Carpenter 158 Plus bolt head steel that they've developed with the Carpenter 158 factory there in PA. I believe it's forged. It takes out a bunch of the imperfections in the metal, so it's supposed to last 3 times longer than a standard mil-spec bolt. Aside from that, they also come with my favorite charging handle, the Geissele airborne charging handle. It's my favorite, ambidextrous. It's a big raised lip in the back to prevent gas from kicking back in your face. Does it prevent all of it? Of course not, none of them do, but it does a pretty damn good job. It also, the latches are just big enough so you can easily access them from both sides, but also not big enough to be caught on your plate carriers or any kind of kit you're running, which I really like. These charging handles go into every build that I can afford to put them in. Lastly, speaking about the BCG, it has an asymmetrical cam pin and a special channel cut out in the upper receivers so that the cam pin rides in one direction. It has a raised ledge on there to cut through any carbon, and it just, again, goes back towards the over-engineering that Geissele's done to ensure the longevity and that these parts last for generations. For the reliability I've gotten out of these things, for the accuracy, the balance, the weight, the cost, they both cost the exact same price, just for you guys who are wondering. There's no cost advantage in going with 11.5. You know, the extra inch doesn't save you money. Everything that they do is super high quality. They have really high quality standards, and I'm just in love with both of these uppers. So there's pretty much my conclusion. I am a huge fan of both of these uppers. You can't go wrong either one you buy. But for those of you who are still here and wondering what is on these setups, I'm gonna go over that now. I will mention as well, if you go to rangedaybro.com, I do have a loadouts tab where you can see all the different parts, the links to those parts on my website. So if you guys wanna recreate one of my builds, you can, and also support the channel at the same time. So starting with the 12.5, which we have right here, we've already talked about the Ferox a little bit, so we'll skip right past that. We do have it direct threaded because it gives you all the best advantages of a suppressor, reduces the weight, reduces the length. It's the shortest and the lightest the can will ever be. The QDs are great. There's some great ones out there today, but I do still prefer to direct thread. If the gun is gonna be primarily run with a can, that's the way I like to do it. Up here, we have a Surefire MD640 dual fuel body with the Unity hot button switch, so momentary and then a full click to keep it on. We are featuring a Vampire light head here, so it's IR as well as white light, and the 100 Concepts Light Cap Pro. We also have the Scope Cap Pro from 100 Concepts right here in the front. I'm a big fan of what those guys are doing. I like these ARDs, and they just work. I'm a big fan of those. For full disclosure, 100 Concepts did send me these products. Now, moving back from there, we have some rail scales over here on the left side. We do have the Samson Manufacturing hand stop here. It's their Shorty Grenade in the FDE. Big fan of that as well. For an optic setup on this guy, we have it in my favorite mount. This is the Badger Condition 1 mount. I'm a huge fan of these. This is on the 1.7 inch height. It makes it, for me, the perfect balance of heads up shooting through the dioptic, through the scope, as well as having it low down enough to get a really good cheek weld for those long range engagements. Up top, we have a Holosun 509T. Top dot, that's more for passive aiming with night vision or the really up close high speed stuff. That works great as well. Now on the 1.7, I will say you're not even getting a chin weld on this guy because it's a little sky high, but again, for night vision, it's perfect and it works pretty well intended for those up close engagements as well. You do need to keep in mind your height over bore situation and know what your holds are at different distances. In the back here, we have an M-Bus Pro rear iron sight. I still need to get one up here for the front. Mentioned the Geissele charging handle already. We do have the braided buffer wire spring and the H3 buffer in here. VCM Gunfighter stock. Geissele A17 grip back here in the back. Delta Team Tactical 3-position FRT trigger, phenomenal trigger. We do have a maritime bolt catch on here. HRF Concepts magwell. This is really great, especially for under nods, for reloads, for even in the daytime, obviously, really great funnel, but especially when you're running night vision. So that pretty much covers the setup for the 12.5. So let's move on to the 11.5. So the 11.5 is also sporting the Energetic Armament Ferox. Up top, we have a Steiner CQB-L. This is an IR and Viz laser. It's pretty compact and relatively affordable. It's about $1,000. So it's about the cheapest you can get into an IR laser for. Over here on the left, we have a Surefire Vampire Scout Mini, IR and white light in one head, which is really cool. And we have the ruggedized 100 Concepts Light Cap Pro over here. Again, same hand stop from Samsung Manufacturing. I'm a big fan of these. So the optic choice I put on for the 11.5, just to have it as much apples to apples with the 12.5, was the Trijicon Credo 1:8. This is their older model that doesn't have the wind holds. I really do wish it had wind holds, but it's got a locking elevation and a locking windage adjustment, which is great. It also has red and green illumination. It's not daylight bright, much like the EOTech, but it is daylight red or green. And that is sitting in an Arkin mount. This Arkin mount is a bit lower than I prefer. I think it's a 1.5, relatively lightweight, pretty robust from everything that I've seen out of them so far, extremely cost effective as well. Moving back from there, same Geissele airborne charging handle, same Geissele BCG we talked about already. This guy does have the H2 buffer weight and the braided wire buffer spring. It is tuned for the H3, but I haven't had any issues running the H2. Obviously, eventually I'm going to replace that with the H3. Geissele DDC buffer tube, SBA4 brace, B5 rear plate with a QD slot. We have the A17 FDE grip from Geissele as well. This guy is supporting the Geissele 2-stage trigger, the G2S trigger. These triggers are the best bargain on the market for the price. You can find them on sale at Brownells or on Geissele directly for pretty insane pricing when you consider how good this trigger is. We have the Radiant selector on the 45-degree throw. Geissele Maritime bolt catch on this lower as well. Huge fan of those. And that pretty much summarizes this thing's setup. Now, with all that being said, guys, I know this is the new hotness. You may be wanting one of these uppers, but don't buy anything you don't need. However, if you're considering buying one, if you're still gonna buy one anyways because you have a problem and you're like me, then I would greatly appreciate it if you head over to rangedaybro.com and use the links on the discount page to save some money and support the channel at the same time. While you're there, please put your email in, subscribe to our email list. Also follow me on Rumble and X. And lastly, please consider joining the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for staying to the end of the video. I really appreciate every single one of you and all the support. And until next time, Christ is King. Stay safe, stay dangerous. Range Day Bro, out.